Good afternoon. It is so nice to have you here again. This is the lovely podcast, The Endurance of Labor Laws. I am your host, Lesley Sullivan. If you would like to call in or email in, that would be wonderful. I would absolutely love to hear from you. Telephone number is 405-314-1119. You can actually call or text on that number. Awesome. Email address is Lesley2018Sullivan@gmail.com. That's Lesley 2018 Sullivan@gmail.com. And so for this episode, this is episode 4 of this podcast, and this is on women's rights in the workplace. This is super importante. And I say super importante because it seems like things come up when it comes to women's rights, and then it just kind of implodes and explodes in the workplace, and it gives me a migraine, and I don't like having migraines, so I thought, well, why not shed a light on this and try and help make things better. So, and I look at this from my personal perspective and my personal experience with living in Oklahoma and living in the Bible Belt. And for those who don't know where Oklahoma is, because for all I know, people in other countries could be listening to this, but Oklahoma is a state that is in the central part of the United States, and it is called the Bible Belt because we have a lot of Bible thumpers in this area, and Bible thumpers mean people that carry their Bibles around and they're quick to thump you with their Bible, whether literally or figuratively, and they can be very combative when it comes to things like that. So it makes it hard to talk to someone that they're just on the defense all the time. They're just wanting to argue with you. And so it makes it hard to practice your faith. It makes it hard to make new friends. It makes it hard to have a calm life if people are just constantly bickering all the time. But this kind of flows into the workplace. So my experience with women's rights in the workplace is that there aren't very many women's rights in the workplace. And that doesn't mean that I think women are more valuable or more important than men, because we're equal. We just happen to be two different sexes. That's it. One sex has ovaries, the others have testicles or testes, whichever word you want to use. So I don't mean to be graphic, but it literally is that simple. It's just your sex of who you are. And women have a very important role in society. Men also have a very important role in society. And because those roles are different, they're also equal, because they're both equally important. So that's how I look at it. My experience in the workplace, when it comes to women's rights, has been very tough because it's like we don't have many. And unfortunately, it's like we have to wait for anything that's new and improved to get here, and it takes several years for it to start on the coast and then eventually get to the central United States. And it's very unfortunate because it makes it very difficult when you're dealing with kind of a super religious area. And you're like, for example, I have faith, I believe in God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit, but I don't believe in being religious. Like, I'm not religious, I just believe. Like, I don't walk around thinking, oh, I'm so spiritual and I'm better than people and I'm going to tell them what to think, how to do everything. No, that's not my job. If someone wants to know why I do something the way I do, then more than likely I will answer them. But I mean, it's not an extreme like what I was raised in, like where it's like a part-time job almost to be mean to people for them being a different religion than you and whatnot. But in regards to the workplace, the number one thing I noticed when I went into the workplace, and I started working when I was 16, and I noticed women were not always treated as well as men. It's like we're treated like morons because we're the weaker sex. And physically, for the most part, we are weaker than men. But that doesn't mean we're stupid or morons or incompetent. And like, I'll give you an example. When I was growing up, I wanted to be a neurosurgeon. And I was told that that is for men, that's not for women. And because you're a girl, you should just be a teacher. Well, I never met a teacher that actually liked their job. or that got paid real well. So the mentality, at least where I am from, was that if you're a woman, because of what sex you were born, you should get a low-paying job because that's all you'll ever be, that's all you'll ever become. That was just the general norm. And I remember in high school, this one teacher that she had become a principal, and it's like, I don't know why this is, but whenever they try and take on a career and a family and they're trying to put their career first, it totally messes up their personality and their hormones. That's what I noticed as a kid. Because this woman, she was okay. She wasn't super nice. She was okay when she was a teacher, but when she became principal of our school, she turned into a total witch. I could use a different word, but it was just awful. Like, us kids, we couldn't stand her once she became principal, and it just kind of became the norm amongst us kids that, whenever we heard that one of our favorite teachers was going to become a principal, we're like, well, when is she going to become mean? It was just like, we just knew there was going to be a change in her mentality and how she treated kids, and it happened every single time. But this one particular teacher, I wasn't a big fan of her, but I remember she became principal, and she was not that nice afterwards with that anyway. But then I was in high school, and it was either my junior or senior year, and she told me that I should be a teacher. I was like, why would I want to do that? And she goes, oh, well, we just need, more women like you to be a teacher. I was like, that doesn't answer the question. It's like, why should I want to be a teacher? Like, I don't see anybody that's happy being a teacher at these schools. And I went to public school. If you went to private school, had a wonderful time, that's great. But I went to public school, and it was very much like Lord of the Flies. And if you have never read that book, please don't read it. There are some parts that are really, to me, gross and intense. Especially psychologically, but, heaven forbid you ever played dodgeball at a public school. It was a free-for-all. It was just like no rules. It was crazy. Like, some of the guys that we went to school with, they would make it a point to hit girls in the face with a dodgeball full force, like arm swing like baseball. It was like horrible. And so, typically in dodgeball, us girls, we would kind of stay back and wait for the guys to kind of knock themselves out before we would take them out in dodgeball. So we learned pretty quick how to play and who to avoid with that. But my point to this teacher was, or principal was, I've never met a teacher that actually enjoyed their job, and the pay is horrible. Like, if anything, we were losing teachers at that time. We were losing them to Texas. They were moving from Oklahoma to Texas because teachers got paid more money down in Texas. And money does matter. Nobody wants to be poor. Nobody. So, that's not a goal. I've never heard anybody say, oh, I want to grow up and be poor. That's not a goal. And if ever someone says that, they're probably a nut. And they need to be slapped, gently. But, somebody needs to slap some sense into them. Because if you're poor, you will have a very hard life, and it makes it difficult to pay just basic necessities and get access to proper medical care, because regardless of whether you have socialized medicine or privatized medicine, like what we have here in the United States, it's very privatized, and I would prefer that over socialized medicine. And regardless of what kind of medicine you have in your country, it all costs money. Like, people are under the false assumption that socialized medicine is free. It's not free. It comes out of everybody's tax dollars. But under socialism, it is predominantly paid by the rich. But that doesn't mean that if you're poor or middle class that you're not paying for it as well, because you are. It's just how the government is taking your money and spending it. So I believe in having privatized medicine because, this is kind of a side note, but I believe in privatized medicine because it puts the patient in charge of their health care. Not the government, not some bureaucrat in Washington, D.C. that has a cushy office and just is a professional paper pusher. And, sometimes we do need bureaucrats, but it gets very irritating when you have people in charge of your life that don't even love you or care about you. They just want your money. That's what it's like. So, I strongly discourage socialized medicine because, they can say, oh, health care for all. That is such a scam, because under socialized medicine, it's limited health care for all. Yes, they all have access to it, but it's limited and it's not immediate. Like, as of right now, with our privatized medicine, if I need something, all I have to do is go to the emergency room, or I can contact my doctor. and just be like, hey, I'm having this problem, can I please come in? And you get seen immediately. People over in the UK, if they need a hip replacement or a knee replacement, it's almost a year or two before they can get it replaced. And then by then, way more damage has been done to the bone, the socket, the joint. So then even more surgery is required. And there are sometimes the damage is so bad that they don't even see them as a candidate anymore to receive a knee replacement or hip replacement. So then you're just kind of forever screwed in terms of that. You know, you just forever become a cripple. So you need to be careful what you wish for. Like, free healthcare sounds good on the surface, but you need to ask who's paying that bill, because nothing is free. Like, even our freedom is not free. So that's just kind of a side note to that. But, you know, that does come up in the workplace, because there are a lot of women that, you know, they want socialized medicine because they want free birth control and they don't want to have to pay to have babies and all this stuff. It's like, again, it's not free. Somebody's having to pay for it. And, you know, it's actually cheaper if the government is not in charge of it, because when you have a free market, that means we, the consumer, have a say in how much we pay for stuff. But if the government is in charge of your health care, it's not good. It really is not. And I know from personal experience, because, you know, when I got really sick, as I mentioned before, I actually thought about immigrating to the UK to possibly have better health care, because I was having a hard time with things here in the United States. And when I did my research, the healthcare that I needed, I would have been put on a long waiting list over in England, as opposed to here, I would have gotten immediate care. And yes, it's more expensive in a sense, but, you know, your healthcare is your healthcare. You know, you put your health first. Like, there are times, like, I've been so sick that I didn't care what something cost, because I valued my life. Like, I can deal with the bill later. Like, I'm not worried about money or a stupid bill from the hospital. Like, I know that they're just charging me what they have to charge, just like medical coding. Like, that's just what it is. But I know that whenever I receive a hospital bill, I don't have to pay full price. Nobody does. Because what you can do is you can contact the business office and you can negotiate what you are willing to pay. And here's the thing, they will more than likely drop it by quite a bit, the price, because hardly anybody ever calls them or contacts them and says, hey, this is what I can do, what can you do for me? Everything is negotiable. That's why I mentioned in a previous podcast, unless it was one of the ones I deleted, it's that, you know, when you treat everything like business, then it takes the emotion out of it. And when you treat it as business, it puts you in control, as opposed to somebody else. So when it comes to your life, your happiness, and your health care and your job, you want to be in the driver's seat, not somebody else. And so when you treat it like business, and that's not personal, even though it is personal, it is your health care, it is your job, it's things of all that nature. When you treat it like business, it puts you in control, and it lets the other person know that you're not going to back down. And that's not to be aggressive. It's just that it lets them know that you are serious about your life, and that you are willing to hear them out, and you're willing to negotiate. You're willing to come to a happy medium. I was going to say compromise, but I've learned to not like that word so much anymore, because sometimes the word compromise, people misinterpret it as that you're giving up something, that it's like you're not going to hold your ground, and that's not true. So I always say, like, a happy medium, you know, come together in agreement. And so, because I look at it this way, like, the word compromise reminds me of the phrase, you know, don't compromise your morals. Well, in that respect, when you compromise, it means you're going against what you really believe in. So don't ever do that. Even in business or relationships, whatever the case may be, I say don't ever compromise. Come to a happy agreement, or meet someone in the middle. As long as it's not illegal or immoral or making you uncomfortable, give it a try, because it will put you in control of the situation, and you will go a lot further, a lot quicker in life, and be more successful and more financially stable. So that's just one thing with that. Now, back to what I was originally talking about with women's rights in the workplace. I would say the number one thing that bothered me when I was younger with that was I couldn't stand being interviewed by older men. When I say older men, I mean by like 20 or 30 years older than me when I was younger. Because they just had this piggish attitude about women that, you know, all you're good for is for sex and for cooking and for marrying and popping out babies. And But see, here's the thing, like they would flat out say it like that, but they just kind of had this attitude problem towards women, especially young women. And if you weren't married by a certain age, I mean, they pretty much call you an old maid and they think you're weird. Of course, this is in Oklahoma. And in Oklahoma, I call that mentality the USS Noah's Ark mentality, because it's like if you're not married or at least shacked up with somebody by a certain age, then they think you're an old maid and you're no good for nothing and you're just taking up space. And I was just kind of shocked at this because I was like, okay, what decade are we in? What century are we in that this is still a problem with that stupid mentality? It was really weird. And what sucked was that if you weren't being discriminated against men that were way older than you, then you're having a problem with women that are in their 50s, and they view young women, especially good-looking young women, which I'm cute. I'm not going to deny that. I know I'm cute. But what frustrated me was that these old bitter Betties, as I call them, they would think that these young women are going to work there to steal all these husbands and, you know, we're up to no good and all this stuff. I'm like, give me a break. I'm just like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, I'm just here to do the job and do it well. I'm here to earn a living. I'm here to move up at the chain of command. I'm here to be successful. Like, I'm not interested in these men here, believe me. And so, especially the older men, but it was just this weird, it was just weird. And it interfered with the job. And, you know, it's like if we weren't being discriminated against by men, we were being discriminated against by older women. And I say bitter Betties because I don't know if they were just going through menopause or what, but it was like, it's like anyone younger than them was a threat to them. Oh, you're trying to take my job. Oh, I don't want my husband to meet you. You know, oh, you can pop out babies, but I can't. Or I never got the chance to have babies. Or something, just like dumb stuff. I'm like, you know what, this is not a biology class. This is not a sex ed class. You know, this is work. And, you know, there are times I'd have to say, hey, I'm here to just do my job. So, you know, do you mind if I just do my job? Like, I understand what you're saying to a certain extent, but it's not really relevant to what I do. But it was like pulling teeth to get people to act appropriately, and it comes back to that mentality of, I don't know if it's just different generations or what, but it was a problem. So there was discrimination against women from other women and also from men. It was really interesting because it's like you think women are going to be on your side. Oh, no, it's like a brood of vipers. It's like a snake pit. And it's just really weird. The other discrimination that I experienced for being a woman is this came from men and women that would do this in the interview. They would want to know if I was married, and they would want to know if I plan on having kids. And because I'm blunt, I was like, what does my sexual activity have to do with me going to work and doing a good job? Like, you know, how and when and if I decide to procreate is my business. It's not anybody else's. It has nothing to do with work. And, you know, I had to learn to not word things like that because I'm just blunt. But, you know, it's just like I couldn't believe what they were asking me. I was just shocked because they act like they don't know the law. And it's like, you got to be kidding me. And then the other discrimination that I experienced was that they didn't really want to hire women that were of childbearing age because they didn't want to have to pay for maternity leave if they offered maternity leave, because not all employers at this time offered maternity leave. And so they kind of viewed young women as a burden and treat them like dirt, like trash, like garbage, because so what, we're of childbearing age. So what if a woman has a baby? Like, she still needs access to food, water, and shelter. Like, she still needs a job. Like, just because a woman has a baby, that doesn't mean they're never going back to work. If anything, a lot of them do need and want to go back to work because they need the money to provide for their child. Because not all these women have husbands. And sometimes their husbands aren't working for whatever reason. And I remember, I'm trying to remember how long ago this was, but there was a really weird phase in Oklahoma where we had quite a few men that refused to work, and they had their wives work. Like, they were just these fat slobs that stayed at home and just didn't do anything. And I just thought, why am I meeting so many women that have bad husbands that refuse to work? It's one thing if they can't work, but it was just weird. Like, they just wanted to be stay-at-home dads, and they didn't always have kids or something. It was weird. I just thought, that's really strange. And I met some of these husbands. They were weird. They were not normal men. I don't know what was wrong with them, but it was just kind of a weird happenstance, I guess you could say, because I'd never met so many weird men that were married. I'm like, how did they ever find someone to marry? Because to me, they were not marriage material by any means. And it was very rare to meet someone that was that odd, but I just thought, man, they both must have been desperate and just decided to get married. But it's like, I don't think so, not for me. Not on that. I refuse to marry someone that's weird like that. It's too creepy. But the other thing in regards to women's rights at the workplace was sometimes women don't get promoted because of their sex. There are people, and both men and women have done this. They have thought that that only men are mentally capable of handling more of a strenuous job responsibility, and men should be more likely to be promoted than women. And my mouth just drops. I'm like, you have got to be kidding me. Like, you do know that women have been doing really intense jobs, like, since the beginning of time. Like, we've had queens on this earth for years. I mean, take a look at England. They've had queens and kings, and I mean, you have queens all throughout the Bible that were in charge of their kingdoms. I'm like, so you're telling me that because they have ovaries that they can't rule their kingdom? You got to be kidding me. Like, if the Queen of Sheba can rule her kingdom, then I'm pretty sure a woman can be promoted into almost any job. Like, I would say any job, really, but I said almost any job because I don't think women should be in the Marines, especially on the front line of that. Because I think there are certain types of combat that should be reserved for men. That's my personal opinion. That's just literally my personal opinion. Because I think it is such a risk to put your women at the front of the line like that. So that's just my personal opinion on that. But pretty much anything else, I have no doubt that women can handle it, because women have been handling stressful things since the beginning of time. I think the fact that women can have babies and, they have more feelings than men, I think that gets skewed as weakness when it's not. It's not a weakness. If anything, it's a strength, because for someone to acknowledge someone else's pain and to sense it immediately, that is a strength, not a weakness. It's actually really good for society to realize very quickly when someone's suffering and want to help them. So that's my personal viewpoint on that, just things I've come across on that. The other thing I want to talk about is gender equality. And, I've worked in work environments where it was predominantly men, and it was not a very positive work environment, not because it was mostly men, but because just the nature of the industry I was in. It's like you have to be careful what kind of personality types you hire. And this place of work preferred to hire guys that really just viewed women as property. And some of these men were foreign. They were from Iran. So it made it very difficult to be taken seriously at your job, and also made it very difficult to get promoted or to get raises. Filling out a new job application, and they ask you those government questions like, are you male, female, are you white, what's it called? I was going to say Alaskan, not Alaskan, but they ask you all these, if you're these different races or whatever. I was thinking Eskimoan is what I was thinking of, or if you're Native American or things like that. And I just thought, what does it matter? I know the federal government, they're trying to push for equality, but when it comes to forms like that, all it does is it gives employers permission to ask you questions that they shouldn't be asking. That's what it's turned into. Like, it's so interesting. Like, the federal government tries to stop certain things, but instead of stopping it, it just actually ends up encouraging it, because employers try and find a way around it, for the legality's sake of it. Like, I don't think it should matter what sex someone is. Like, I don't think it should matter what race someone is. And, I actually kind of find it offensive that on that government form, and this is probably going to piss off a lot of people, but I could care less at this point in my life, but I find it offensive that when it's talking about the different races, it just says, when it comes to like people of European descent, it just says white, as opposed to, other races. You have African American, you have Native American, Indonesian, or whatever the case may be. But when it comes to people who are fair skinned, we're just white. Well, I'm not just white. I'm French and Irish. Like, I'm of European descent, so does my ancestry not even matter at all? Like, if someone else's skin color matters, then so does mine. If their ancestry matters and where their ancestors came from matters, then so do mine. I think we should list all of them on there. If we're gonna play that game, which is what is happening, it's been slowly growing over the years. This game about race and inequality with that, and it just, to me, it kind of sets people up for failure if you have a form like that. And I know it's become the norm, and everybody's so used to filling them out, but I still don't think it's right. I really don't. And I know that employers don't like having to use that because, see, here's the thing, what the federal government does, and people may not be aware of this, but here's what the federal government does with that form. When it asks about your sex, your race, blah, blah, blah kind of thing, especially when it comes to race, when that form gets submitted, the federal government has statistics, and what they do is if they notice that an employer is not hiring very many African Americans or not very many Hispanics, then they try and sue the employer. They try and fine them first, thousands if not millions of dollars for so-called practicing discrimination. But if you look at the place where the employer is located in the industry they're in, there may not have been very many African Americans that applied to the job, or there may not be any successful. It's just something you're born really hiring them for their brain, their skill set, their talent, their character. It's very just plain discriminatory to hire any other way like that. It's really bizarre to me. And I came across that in the workplace all the time, especially when I was in my 20s, because I tell you what, I could not stand, I hated looking for a job in my 20s because it was just so tense, because you had to be careful, like what you said in the interview, and then also, it's like if you're a young person, especially a young woman, they don't think you're worth the same wages as someone that's in their 30s or 40s, even though you have the same experience, or you may have the same degree, but they think that age is equivalent to pay, and it's not. Age is just a number. It doesn't determine your wages. So I came across that as well, where it's like, oh, only older women should make good money. No, every woman should make good money. It's dependent upon their education, their skill set, and what they can bring to the table in terms of negotiations for their job. It has nothing to do with age or how many babies you've had. And I came across this. Oh, this is horrible too. Oh, this is just discrimination as well. So I worked one job, I'm not going to say where, but I worked one job where I noticed something funky was going on with my paychecks. And I was like, what is going on with this? So I went to my boss, job, and moved. Like, they think, well, also, they claim to be Christian. Within their Christianity that they practice, which it was not Christianity they were practicing, doesn't mean nobody wants you, it just means you're not married yet. And that's marital status discrimination. I came across that all the time in my 20s. It's calmed down now in my 30s, but in my 20s, it was just horrible. It was rampant, and I hated it. I was just like, oh my gosh. I just told him, I was like, would you like to have kids? Or, because you didn't get married and divorced, like, what do I care what her sexual habits are? That's not my business, and it's not her business that I don't have any kids and I'm not married. Like, who told her that? Like, that's between me and HR. So, did they show her that government form that I filled out that said I'm single? And that I'm not filing any dependents? Because if you show someone that form, and they're not in HR, and they're not supposed to be looking at that, then, you've pretty much committed a federal crime on that, because you're showing someone else another employee's social security number as well. So they didn't like being called out on any of that. I was just shocked at their behavior. But needless to say, I lost my job. And it was pretty brutal. And what's interesting is that everybody else I worked with, they're just like, we can't believe they did that to you. It was so disturbing. And a lot of people left that place of business because of what this employer did to me. So shame on them. And in case there is anyone that is quite angry at what happened to me, I say thank you. I appreciate that. It's nice to know when other people get irritated or fed up with behavior like that, because sometimes I feel very much alone because of where I live and the mentality of some people here. It's just like, you've got to be kidding me. So in that same token, I'll say this, the way that I handled that was I chose to just move on, and I just forgave them in my heart. Even though I couldn't stand those people, I know what they did was illegal and immoral. I chose to forgive them and just go just move on, turn the other cheek, as they say, and just move on in a better direction and just have a better life than what I had before. And, it brings to mind to forgive your enemies and also to ask God to bless your enemies. Now, I bring that up because it took me a long time to understand that in the Bible, because that angered me for years, to ask God to bless your enemies. So I'm like, why would I want people who are so horrible to me? Well, here's what that is saying. And once it was explained to me correctly, then I understood the language with it. So here's the thing. When you ask God to bless your enemies, you're not asking God to just overlook their offenses and just make them millionaires and billionaires, and it's okay that they walked all over you. No. When you're asking God to bless your enemies, this is what is happening. In order to be blessed by God, you have to repent and be truly sorry for anything and everything that you did wrong. And you have to try and make amends to the best of your ability and acknowledge that you were wrong, and you're going to turn over a new leaf and you're going to start doing right. Because if you don't start doing right, then God's not going to bless you. So when you have an enemy or someone that's offended you or hurt you or harmed you, when you forgive them and you ask God to forgive them and you ask God to bless your enemies, you're actually asking God to help change that person's heart and to give them a chance to ask for forgiveness and to repent. And when I realized that, I was like, oh, thank you, Jesus. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Lord, forgive them and bless them. I like, whenever I meet someone I don't like, I'm like, Lord, bless them and forgive them. Because I have seen this come to pass in my life where someone hurt me, harmed me, totally did me wrong. And I asked God to bless them and forgive them. And I have actually been receiving apologies from people. Whereas before, when I was forgiving them in my heart, but I was still angry about it. And I wasn't always asking God to forgive them, much less bless them. I was still really pissed off about it. Like, I never saw anyone apologize to me. I never saw anything good come out of that. So I didn't really understand what it meant to ask God to bless your enemies. And then once I understood it, and I actually started utilizing that in my daily life, and I started practicing that and just really opened my heart to a large amount of forgiveness to people, seeing people change and really not only giving their life to Christ, but just wanting to be a better person in general. Like, even if they weren't religious, even if they didn't really completely believe in God, or maybe they did, but they weren't really sure, they knew they had done wrong. Regardless of whether someone's Christian or not, people know when they do something wrong. Like, that's just your conscience. Like, that's what we're born with. We're born with knowing right from wrong. You have that small, still voice in you that says, don't do that, steer clear of that, that kind of thing. But I kid you not, if there are people in your life that you don't like, or that you have not forgiven, or maybe have forgiven, but they still really anger you and bother you, ask God to bless them and to forgive them, and you will literally feel that tension and that dread leave your body, because that's what happened to me. And that's what I had to do in these circumstances, because I was coming up against so much discrimination for being a woman, for being young, for being single, for not having any babies, whether in wedlock or outside of wedlock. And to me, that was so hypocritical, because for years I was discriminated against for not being married and not having any kids. Well, then there was so much sexual activity outside of marriage. Like, it just grew and grew in Oklahoma. Like, people started being more promiscuous and not getting married, that then they started shaming me and judging me for for not even shacking up and having kids out of wedlock. So it's like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, you're claiming to be Christian, but you're looking down on me because I haven't shacked up with somebody and I haven't had a bunch of kids with all these different daddies or whatever. Like, you got to be kidding me. It was so weird. Like, I just thought, what is wrong with our society that is so far from being holy that they're just throwing it around, I mean, like confetti, and that's not what it was meant to be. Is sex pleasurable and enjoyable? Sure. But when people start shaming me for not even having sex and for not having kids out of wedlock and they're using that against me in the workplace, that's just a whole different level of sick. And that's what I was coming across at work. That's what I was having to deal with, and I was not prepared for that. I didn't think stuff like that would happen. And I really didn't know how to fight it because, again, I was in my 20s. I wasn't really aware of all the different labor laws that we have and your rights. And so I just kind of felt overwhelmed, and I didn't even really want to fight it. I just wanted to move on to a better place. I wanted to move on to a better employer, and I did. I found a better employer, better bosses, better employees to work with, where we had camaraderie. We cared about each other, and, there wasn't discrimination like that. So, needless to say, it matters where you work. And if you're working for an employer where they pull shady stuff like what I just described, if they're willing to do that to you, they're willing to do it to somebody else. And if they're willing to do that to somebody else, it eventually could happen to you. So just know that if the workplace is not on the up and up, you need to find a different place to work, because however long you stay there is however long you are absorbing that kind of behavior as normal workplace behavior, and eventually over time, it will dull your morality, it will dull your character, and you'll slowly be working in a gray area as opposed to knowing right from wrong and looking at things black and white, yes and no. And it's really important that we work where we are supposed to work and it be a good workplace environment. And if we're in a bad situation like that, I would say go ahead and get your resume ready and just go ahead and start applying to jobs. And, just go to interviews when you can. And right now it should be easy because you can just do Zoom meetings like on your lunch break or something like that, or you can just communicate via email and or do like a phone call. So I really had to put my foot down in terms of where do I want to work and what am I willing to put up with? Because whatever you're willing to put up with typically is what you're willing to tolerate. And what you're willing to tolerate is usually what you're willing to let see be contaminated in your life. So, there's this word tolerant. Oh, we need to be more tolerant. Well, that goes both ways. I've worked jobs where I thought, well, I don't like how I'm being treated, but I'll stick it out and I'll see if it gets better. It never got better. I had to leave, or I got fired, or I had to just go ahead and look for a job elsewhere. When a workplace is bad, it's bad. It doesn't necessarily have to be hostile per se. It doesn't have to be violent or anything like that, which would be horrible in itself. But, when something is not completely on the up and up, that is not a good place to continue to work, because wherever you work affects your character, and it also reflects on you what's going on there, even if you're not directly involved in the shady stuff. Like, if you continue to work somewhere where they're practicing very unethical employment practices, even if you're not in management, or even if you're not in HR, or you're not the owner or the CEO, it still matters that you work there, because it reflects on you. And I would strongly suggest that you not let what an employer does bring anything bad to your good name, because your name is good. Even if you don't think your name is good, it is, because, your name is who you are, and you need to be true to yourself. And it's in those moments that we realize, hey, I'm not really growing as a good person here. I think I need to look elsewhere. That's just kind of how I talk to myself in my brain and in my heart. Is this really what I want for my life? Yeah, but is it my calling? Is it what I'm supposed to accomplish in my lifetime? Is it what I'm supposed to be doing? Is it truly making me happy? That's how I look at things. And, being from Oklahoma, it's a good place to live, but it does have its downside in terms of employment law violations, especially with OSHA and things like that, and with discrimination against women. It's getting less and less discriminatory, because I think we're slowly becoming modern in terms of how to view women and appropriately. And that doesn't even include sexual harassment. I'm not even going to go there in this podcast, but it's important to know that you have value, you have self-worth, regardless of how someone else treats you, or regardless of what pay grade you're in, or what pay grade you wish you were in. You still have value. Don't ever throw that away. Don't ever speak negatively towards yourself. Don't ever think negatively towards yourself. Just immediately cast those thoughts out, or just rebuke them and just say, I'm not going to think that way about myself. I know I'm a good person. I always put my best foot forward, and, I have good moral character, and I don't back down from a good fight. And that doesn't necessarily mean like a fist fight. It means that, a lot of the fights that we deal with are very non-physical. And I think that's what makes it so difficult to realize when we're actually in a fight. A lot of the fights I've had to deal with have been in situations where it's like dealing with morals and values and dilemmas and things like that. It's not always someone like slapped your face or something. It's not as obvious as that, but it's really a character battle. How much do I value my character? Am I going to sell out my integrity? And what I tell people in a movie theater, I don't sell seats for my integrity. I don't sell out for anything. That's not how I roll. And that pisses off a lot of people, because I've learned that there are quite a few people, they don't value integrity like this country used to. Even though I may not agree with everybody, but integrity used to mean something. It really did. Like, even if we have different personalities, it didn't matter. At least we knew our integrity was good, like back in the day. But sometimes it's tough fighting for integrity, because you're kind of shocked that you have to fight for it. And you can't settle for anything less than the best. You just can't, because if you settle for anything less than the best, you've basically thrown in the towel already, and then you've basically just turned yourself into a doormat to allow anyone to walk over you and manipulate you. And that sucks, because it's harder to get out of a hole than to just walk around it. So that's how I have handled those situations in regards to employment law, and how to overcome that. And there's a time to fight it, and there's a time to walk away from bad situations. And sometimes, I'll be the first to admit, I didn't always know what to do in situations like that, which is typically why I just walked away, because I wasn't sure who to reach out to. I didn't even know way back in the day that you could contact the Department of Labor and report stuff. No one ever told me that. It was just always the employer was very intimidating, was threatening, especially to women, especially young women. And, when someone's threatening you and intimidating you and being a jerk to you, it's very convincing, because 99% of the time they really mean it. So, you just kind of, I don't know, for me personally, I got sick and tired of walking on eggshells, and I just thought, I need to know my rights, because I'm sick of this crap, because that's what it is. It's crap. It's not someone wanting what's best for you when they're violating your rights. Worse for you, but they think they have the right to walk all over you when they don't. So if you know your rights, and you know who to contact, and you know who to call or email or write a letter, then you're already ahead in the game, because you're already seeing the path you want to take, and you've already got a battle plan, so to speak. And I don't mean a battle plan in terms of violence. I mean, like, you have a mental game plan of what you're going to do and how you're going to maneuver stuff in a legal, moral, and ethical manner. Because, let's just call it like we see it. Call a spade. If you know you're dealing with someone unethical, you already know what they're going to do. It's almost always going to be something unethical. What's shocking is when other people fall for their behavior and they think it's okay. And that always feels weird. I've had that happen to me, where I was pretty much the only ethical person speaking at this one meeting. I was just like, how do these other people fall for this? And the way that people fall for it is they don't realize that they've sold out their integrity, and they don't realize that what they're participating is just as unethical as the bad person that's in that room. And in those situations, you might be the odd person out. But, to me, I consider that an honor. Because if I'm the odd person out, that means that it's not the place for me. That's just how I look at it, and that I need to move on to something better. I need to be around people that are of the same mind, of the same morals, the same values. And I don't necessarily mean like all going to the same church, because I don't always like that. But just people that you have genuine interest in and you genuinely care about each other. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to practice the same religion, you have to eat the same food, you have to talk the same, be the same, dress the same. None of that is true. None of that is relevant. It's just having a genuine interest to do the right thing regardless of what occurs. I guess would be the best way to describe that. So let me go back to that app because it's one of my favorites, the I Am app. So let's see what it has here. Let me open this puppy up. It's thinking about it. And my phone is being a little slow, probably because it was doing an update. Oh, this is a good one. Everyone has something to teach me. That is true. And I'll give an example. Whenever I'm working with people that I can't stand, and usually when there are people that I can't stand, it's because they're doing something really bad or wrong, or they put me down for having morals and values, and they know I'm not going to compromise my morals or integrity. I learn a lot from bad people, and what I learn is don't do that, don't do that, don't do what they did, do the opposite, because that actually is like a manual of what not to do, is how I look at it, because it used to irritate me when I was around bad people at work. And I was like, I've got to look at this in a positive way, otherwise I'm going to drive myself crazy on this. So I just looked at it as, well, that's a good example of what not to do. Good mental note. That's just how I learned to look at it. The next one, this one's good. Jealousy has no place in my life. That is good. I'm grateful I get to wake up today. Awesome. I focus on healing myself with love. Getting more confident. My power is on the inside. I'm thankful for my dreams of yesterday because they are the reality of today. I love that. So just some more positive affirmations from that app. I think it's good to be positive regardless of your circumstances, even if it's just trying to find simple sentences that have a lot of meaning behind them, because I don't look for complicated things. I think working in the complicated just makes life, it's in those moments actually for you and not for somebody else, but it's specifically for you and for your life to have a better life regardless of your circumstances. So thank you for joining me today. And as usual, I pray that you are healthy, wealthy, whole, and that you're blessed in every area of your life. Until next time, have a wonderful week or a wonderful day. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.